Welcome to Front Office Pros. The NFL draft is officially over, and now it is time to reevaluate dynasty values for players. For this video, we will be discussing the top NFL draft losers following the results from the NFL draft. Before we get started, we are a new channel, so if you enjoy this content, we ask you to smash that like button to show your support.
Hike!
All right, Joe, so start us off. Who is your first NFL draft loser?
Yeah, my first NFL draft loser is running back Tyler Algier. Now, this is a guy that you've been giving your warnings to, Steve, saying that, this exact situation could happen, especially to our good friend of this show, Dustin Ludke, who was very unhappy with this pick by the Atlanta Falcons. But Tyler Algier, being the fifth round pick that he was, knew that there was a chance that, they definitely could take Bijan Robinson at number 8 in the first round. And, that exact situation happened, and now he's going to supersede Tyler Algier as the number 1 back. And this is like worst case scenario because Bijan Robinson's, 3-down workhorse back, which is exactly how I expect Arthur Smith to use him in this offense. And now, Algier will be taking the back seat to Bijan Robinson now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think his dynasty value just implodes with Bijan Robinson there. You don't draft a running back in the top 10 like Bijan Robinson, and his caliber, he's going to be a 3-down workhorse running back. And I don't even know what's going to happen to Cordarrelle Patterson. He was already a makeshift running back before. I think I don't know what they're going to do with him. Maybe they maybe even cut him. I'm not even sure.
You think they might use him more in like a back to more of a receiving role now, where the need's not there for him to play so much running back? Maybe they have some plays where wheel routes out of the backfield, or even stick him in the slot or something.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, honestly, obviously the age factor, you would like Tyler Algier better than Cordarrelle Patterson, but kind of for what he brings, you could probably see where you've got both Bijan Robinson and Cordarrelle Patterson in the backfield, like you said, but using Cordarrelle Patterson as a receiving entity. But Algier, I don't know what they're going to do with him.
Yeah, because I mean, really, Algier was more of the, first and second down running back and just more of the power back, and, surprisingly had some breakaway runs, showed a little more speed than I thought he had, but really that, third down role was Cordarrelle Patterson and use him in the receiving game and stuff. So it definitely will be interesting to see how they utilize these guys.
Well, it's definitely a sign of caution for those of you who were hoping that this wouldn't happen. Anytime a running back has late round draft capital, it's not a guarantee that they're going to continue to be given the opportunities. So you would have said, oh, Algieri's got a great opportunity. Then what do you know? He just got, vultured by Bijan Robinson.
100%.
So my first NFL draft loser is running back Kenneth Walker. After Rashad Penny went out for the year against the Saints, Walker got a huge workload. A couple metrics here. Total snaps wise, he was 12th in the league. He had 86% of the carries for the Seattle Seahawks, 205 rushing attempts, which was the third highest among running backs. So you have that from last year. Now they draft Zach Charbonnet in the second round. Zach Charbonnet will definitely eat into Kenneth Walker's opportunities. I don't see him getting the third highest amount of attempts in the league, nor will he get 86% of the. It's probably going to be more maybe 60-40 or maybe even 50-50. And even in the receiving game, I know, Joe, you tried to tell me that, he can't catch passes, but he got 28 targets last year, which was 30th among running backs, and 63% of the receiving targets, he shared those with DJ Dallas. Enter in, Zach Charbonnet. I think Zach Charbonnet is a more natural receiver than Kenneth Walker. So now you're talking about, okay, how many targets is he taking away from Kenneth Walker? So now is it going to be a 50-50 split with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, or maybe even a 60-40 split with Charbonnet getting more? So I think one of the things that we like about running backs is the ability for volume. And now Kenneth Walker, his volume has definitely diminished with the Seahawks drafting Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, there's no doubt, his overall volume definitely will get diminished. I think Kenneth Walker owners would have loved to have seen, just like a more of a receiving, quick speed type of back that, you would still see Kenneth Walker with the bulk of the workload, but then, maybe a more traditional third down back. But I mean, Charbonnet is absolutely, capable of being a 3-down back, and it's like the worst case scenario. And I definitely see, as you mentioned, like a 60-40 split or even 50-50, because I mean, we all know Pete Carroll and the Seahawks, they love to split carries between backs as well. They've, you know, other than when like Pete Carroll had Marshawn Lynch, for the most part, he's always had two backs that he liked to utilize.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I think, and we're going to be talking about our dynasty tiers down the road, but to me, I think Kenneth Walker takes a huge dive. And I've already told you, I have my concerns with running backs with the ability of possibly being 5'9" or below. So now you enter in a guy with an all-purpose back with Zach Charbonnet. The reason why we liked Walker was because when Penning went down, it was him. He was the only guy. Not the case anymore. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but his value definitely took a dip.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it just sucks because Walker's a really interesting player. I really like him as a running back. And like you said, for now, that volume that we all like to see and the volume he got last year once Penny did go down, I mean, now that that's not his anymore, it's definitely disappointing. So my second NFL draft loser, Steve, is wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. Now, this is a guy who's coming off his best season last year. He had 61 receptions for 839 yards and 3 touchdowns. Almost was a 1,000-yard receiver, with only having Deshaun Watson there for few games at the end of the year there. So now they take Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round, which is very similar size to Donovan Peoples-Jones. They both do the same thing. Bigger guys that like to go down the field and be a down the field threat. And then, even because they're big body guys, like could be utilized in the red zone. But now with that offense, you're going to be battling Amari Cooper. They traded for Elijah Moore, and then with Cedric Tillman there for targets, this was unfortunate for Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, I was surprised that the Cleveland Browns drafted Cedric Tillman. I wonder if it was a best player available situation where they drafted him in the 3rd round, because like you said, they are very similar receivers. And I thought that they liked Donovan Peoples-Jones quite a bit. He was a talented receiver at Michigan, was a highly recruited, I think he might have been even a 5-star high school athlete when he came, into college. So he has that potential. It just hasn't really been untapped. We started to see it a little bit last year. The only way I think that his value possibly doesn't take a dip is we've been talking about how we suspect that this offense could drastically change its identity. Really, before it was a ground and pound offense, really centered around Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt no longer there. They may really hand the keys over to Deshaun Watson, and he might be throwing the ball many, many times a game. He might throw over 500 attempts for the entire season, which then you could say he's got enough targets to still be relevant, but otherwise it could be concerning.
Yeah, like you said, unless I do think there's going to be an uptick in the passing volume. It's going to be a matter enough. Is it enough to potentially support 4 or 5 guys in the offense? I mean, you got Njoku at tight end as well. So I guess we'll see, but you're right. Unless the passing volume takes a significant increase, the targets just might not be there for him.
That's a good point too, because he's got to support Amari Cooper, David Njoku, and then most likely you'd say Elijah Moore as the 3rd, or flip flop Njoku and Moore. So does he really have enough to then possibly support Tillman and Donovan Peoples-Jones? Probably not.
Yeah, it wouldn't have. The Elijah Moore move didn't really scare me for Peoples-Jones because, they could just put him in the slot being he's a smaller, faster guy. But the fact that Tillman is basically almost the exact same size as weight, he might be a little taller than Peoples-Jones, I think, by an inch. But their main skill set is big guy down the field threats. I don't know. I was really surprised by the pick as well because I thought they liked Peoples-Jones. They utilized him quite a bit last year and thought he could maybe take another step this year, but now it's going to be tough.
So my second NFL draft loser is wide receiver Rashad Bateman. I think we've already seen Bateman kind of going back and forth on social media, with the Baltimore front office, not getting the respect that he feels he deserves. Last season, he played 6 games, and the season before that, he played 12 games, so hasn't been able to stay healthy, hasn't been able to stay on the field. Last season, he had 28 targets with a 17.2% target share, which you would say, hey, that's not that bad. But that ranked 51st in the NFL, and he ranked 66 amongst receivers with targets. So now, before he was sharing targets with Mark Andrews, Devin Duvernay, and Isaiah Likely. Now you enter in the picture Odell Beckham Jr., who they signed in free agency. They also drafted Zay Flowers and signed Nelson Aguilar. Lamar Jackson, maybe the identity of the offense will change with Todd Monken coming in as the offensive coordinator. But is Lamar Jackson really going to throw over 500 attempts to be able to support all these receivers? At the end of the day, Rashad Bateman, his routes ran were 116, which was 90th in the NFL. So I have some really strong concerns when it comes to Bateman. I liked him as a prospect coming into the draft. When he went to Baltimore, I was very disappointed because he was a guy that I was targeting. And then after that landing spot, I wasn't really that interested. I think for his dynasty value, I hope he gets traded or goes to a different team somehow, because I think he's going to be buried behind this depth chart now.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, there's, like you mentioned, there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense now. I do expect, them to become more of a passing offense. Now, you're talking about 500 total pass attempts for Lamar Jackson. I don't know if it'll be, to that extent, but, being that they get Zay Flowers now, speedy, fast receiver as well, and Bateman's had his struggles staying on the field and staying healthy. So, I get that he feels disrespected, but at the same time, he hasn't also offered much return for the Ravens, as he hasn't been on the field either. So my third NFL draft loser is tight end Greg Dulcich. I know this might come to you as a surprise, Steve, because you would text me like right after this trade happened, thought about what happened to Dulcich. At first, I was like, I don't know if it'll be that big of a deal, but just hearing Sean Payton talk about these draft picks and after the draft and just what he did overall in the draft. I mean, the Broncos are just getting bigger, physical. Seems like they're going to really be run first, and that is Greg Dulcich's weakness, is his ability to run block. He's more of a, the new school tight end, as we've been saying, where he's just that down the field threat, but hasn't really developed much as that blocker. And, they acquire Adam Troutman, signed Chris Manhertz in the offseason, and those guys are, really good run blockers. PFF actually graded Adam Troutman as the best run blocking tight end from last year.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's pretty concerning for me for Dulcich. I think they got Alberto on the roster. I think he's as good as gone at this point. I think maybe if they go with 2 tight end sets, Dulcich will have the chance if Troutman just stays as the blocking guy. But unlike Chris Manhertz, Troutman does give you something in the passing game too, as he can do both. So there could be less plays for Greg Dulcich to be out there, which would really hurt him as far as opportunities.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw that he was on your list for NFL draft loser, because I didn't think that you were that worried about him. But it just goes to show that's the concern when it comes to regime change. You have a certain regime. I know George Payton was there, but the head coach is what drives the X's and O's. So you have Sean Payton now coming in. Greg Dulcich wasn't his guy. Does he not fit what he wants to do in the offense and his vision that we heard several times in his press conference? So now they trade Adam Troutman. What happens with Greg Dulcich? That's always the danger when it comes to Dynasty. You draft a guy you think you're going to be really good, and then it's kind of out of your hands. He actually had I think, somewhat promising rookie season. But now, what ends up happening to him. I think the other thing, Joe, that you didn't mention that is also a concern is I see the Broncos running more 11 personnel than 12 personnel, meaning that they're only going to have 1 tight end on the field with 3 receivers. And with the drafting of Marvin Mims, does that mean now they've got Sutton, Judy, Mims, and Tim Patrick? So more than likely, they're not going to be running 12 personnel when there's 2 tight ends on the field. So if that's the case and they need that tight end to block, it's most likely going to be Troutman and not Dulcich. So like you said, I wonder where the snaps are going to come for Dulcich.
Yeah, that was my thinking as well. That was what I was saying two tight end sets, he could be okay. But with the addition of Mims and the receivers that Broncos have, I don't really see that either. So that's what really made me start thinking about this and thinking of it be a little more concerning. Interesting. I read this morning that too. Troutman's the one who actually made this trade happen. He wanted to be off of New Orleans Saints, and he wanted to come into Denver with reunite with Sean Payton. So I thought that was interesting as well. And Broncos end up making it happen. But yeah, that's the concerning part for me. Sean Payton did say, he did mention in his very last conference about players developing their skills. And I almost was wondering if that's he was alluding to the tight end group and Alberto and Greg Dulcich developing into those run blockers that he'd want them to be.
So my third NFL draft loser, and it's a doozy, is running back Travis Etienne after James Robinson was essentially a healthy scratch and then traded to the New York Jets. Etienne had the entire backfield to himself. He had 74% of the carries for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had 166 rushing attempts, which was the 11th highest amongst running backs, and his total snap count was 7th in the NFL amongst running backs at 460 snaps. And to my surprise, last season, and I didn't really know this until I actually took a deep dive, but he actually shared almost 50% of the receiving targets as running back JaMycal Hasty. And he ranked 25th amongst running backs in targets and receptions. He only had 27 targets and 22 receptions. So to me, that's pretty concerning. Now you've got Tank Bigsby entering into the picture. They draft him in the third round, which is pretty decent draft capital. I have to think that the percentage of carries is going to maybe be at least 50-50 or 60-40. But either way, it's going to cut into Etienne's volume. So in order for Etienne, in my opinion, to stay at that running back one caliber of player, he's going to have to get way more targets. So you've got to look at probably 50-plus targets for him in order for him to really be in that RB1 territory. Now, Tank Bigsby isn't going to be a threat in the receiving game. He's going to take those carries away from him in the rushing game. But like I said, he only had 27 targets last year. So we need to see, I think, double the outcome next year. And I think that's a little unlikely.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned with Travis Etienne as you are. I think what the Jacksonville Jaguars just realized is this guy is extremely explosive, but he can't handle the heavy workload that he was given once Robinson had left. He started to wear down. He was a little bit injured. So then, they use him a little bit less. JaMycal Hasty comes in, a little bit more. But I think, Etienne's not really a volume player. And I understand that to you, you're like, well, in order to score fantasy points, you got to have the volume. Well, Etienne's just an explosive guy who can do more with less potentially. So even if his volume goes down a little bit, I think the explosive plays will still be there for him to get his yardage or even long touchdowns. And I think that's what's most valuable. And, maybe if he does, have a little bit less rushing attempts, could actually be good for him if he's used more in the passing game, because then he's not getting, demolished in the inside run game by, these big old linebackers and stuff.
I get that, but isn't it kind of concerning for you that last season he basically shared the receiving game with JaMycal Hasty and only had gotten 27 targets? If his running attempts are going to take a dip, I understand he's an explosive player, but Bigsby's going to eat into that. So in order for his volume to possibly, you're saying, I like Etienne, but he's going to have to do more with less. That's no guarantee.
Yeah, I just think he has the ability to do more with less potentially. And, Hasty was interesting. That's why I had him on my Dynasty team last year. Actually, I picked him up, rolled with him a little bit because he got there. But, I think that was also after they realized that Etienne just had a lot of workload in the beginning of the year too. They were trying to just keep him healthy. So, in case they did make it to the playoffs, because they needed them for the playoff push, more so than they did for these regular season games. So, I think maybe, the volume will be, maybe it won't be so much 50-50 like you saw with Hasty. Plus you said, with Bigsby, he doesn't really expect to take much out of the passing game like a JaMycal Hasty would necessarily. So.
I get the explosion. To me, maybe it's just a philosophy difference between you and me, but give me the all-purpose back all day long. Even like a Najee Harris, who I don't have to even worry about the possibility of another running back, kind of spilling into the carries or the targets. To me, if you've got a running back that is going to have 75, 80, even 85% of the total carries, snaps, targets, give me that running back all day long, because they're going to have more cracks, at the end zone, more cracks at the first downs, more cracks at big plays. I understand what you're saying, more with less, but to me, that could be concerning.
I mean, I think ETN is literally like the same player as like a Tony Pollard. And Tony Pollard was fine for fantasy last year, even with Ezekiel Elliott being more of that short yardage inside run game and, stealing some touchdowns along the goal line. And Pollard did just fine. And that's the same class I have ETN in. Pollard can't handle the, 100% of the workload with his frame and body either. It wears down over time. Same thing happens with ETN. I think it's just the philosophy difference in the backs. Of course, we'd all want the big 3-down backs that are going to have all these opportunities, but there's less and less in those in the league. So I think there is a spot for these guys like an ETN or Tony Pollard who specialize in just being big playmakers and being explosive, but aren't going to get necessarily the workload that a true 3-down back would.
Yeah, I guess the difference is, to me, before they drafted Tank Bigsby, I could have seen him possibly be in that category of having a larger workload, but you always saw him as this type of player. So this is just confirmation for you that this is the player he's going to be. Or for me, I had that potential in my mind, that now that potential is gone because Bigsby is now in the picture.
Yeah, he's just too small. His frame literally just can't handle that workload. I mean, we saw it with the injuries when he was being utilized that much, but then we also saw, I feel like his explosive plays go down because he was getting overworked. So to me, it's like, just reduce the workload a little bit and let this guy be the explosive player that he is.
So that concludes our NFL Draft Losers following the results of the NFL Draft. If you enjoyed this video, we ask you to please like this video to show your support for our channel. Comment below on who you think was the biggest NFL Draft Loser, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also recently have joined Apple and Spotify podcasts, so you can follow us there as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.